Welcome to our Project Advisory Committee meeting today, number 12, our 12 one. So welcome. So just for reference, who are we? We are right now we have the DOT, which is me, officially I'm the project engineer. Together with I have Neil here standing.
Good afternoon. See everyone.
And we also have consultants here, CDM, who's all in charge of the engineering study. That's Sharat. And the consultant is headed by Janine over here in front of us. And then Rick Black will do most of our presentation today. And some people from SLR will be Connor. And then Joe. Yep. And then we have FHI who's leading our communication efforts. You met them in front. There's Laura here at the back, and then Marcy at the front, the registration. And there you go. So before we move forward, I think I did this last time. It will be nice that everyone introduce yourself and specify which organization you belong. So we'll know who is in this room. So. The consultant part, maybe we could start someone from the front. Sharon, if that's okay with you.
Sure. Sharon, please draw the planning director in Danbury. I'm Katie Pearson, the library director in Danbury.
Tom Altman, City of Danbury Engineering Department, engineer.
You.
John Jetfield, Commission for Persons with Disabilities in Danbury.
I'm Barry Abrams. I'm with the Juniper Ridge Tax District in Danbury.
Francis Pickering, Western Connecticut Council of Governments.
Shane Arishat, Economic Development Director, City of Danbury.
Yep. So.
Yeah, hi, Matt Kezvecchia, City of Danbury Emergency Management and Danbury Hospital Emergency Medical Services.
Perry Salvain, City Center Danbury and Danbury Planning Commission.
Dave McCollum, Town of Bethel Land Use Department.
Chris Rasha. I work for a company in Danbury, Connecticut Weather.
James Root, Connecticut Sierra Club and Danbury resident.
Oh, I forgot to mention, we also have our consultant here.
I'm Julie George with the Agency of Associates, and we're a subconsultant to SLR on the environmental.
So she's doing some environmental study too. And so with that, we'll go with today's agenda. So first, usual thing, we'll do a fact update. And then if you recall, on our 2 months ago, we had our last, in-person fact meeting in this, not in this building, but another building in this university. We did the screening of the remaining segments, the west, the east, and center segments. So today, we'll do the discussion of the we'll combine the previously screened segment concepts. And then with that, we'll do screening of concept combinations, and then we'll end with next steps before we open the floor for discussions and questions. So for fact update. So since our last meeting in October, we combined concepts for the entire corridor. We did the main line, we did the east, center, and west. So now we're combining all of them. Then we continue adding concepts to our project website. So we have most of them. We still have some concepts that we're still under review, but we'll keep adding that. And then we're also active in our social media accounts. We have Facebook, we have Instagram. If you follow us at I-84 Danbury for Instagram and I-84 Danbury Project for Facebook. Oh, and Twitter as well, I-84 Danbury. We also continue advertise to public info meeting. So tonight, I believe most of you received our email that we have our public info meeting at 5:30. It's gonna be in this room. If you all can make it later, we would appreciate. So we'll do some presentation. We'll have some boards around here. So feel free to come by, and we have advertised this not just through you all. We also advertise it in our social media accounts, to the newspaper, local newspapers such as Tribuna, and then it's also available on DOT website. And then throughout this meeting that we've been doing, the PEL process, we've been documenting it through a PEL report. And so with that, I'll hand it to Rick Black, who will do most of our presentation today.
Thanks,
Thank
Chris.
you.
Thanks. Good to see you guys out today. One thing I want to kind of dovetail in what Chris just said about our meeting this evening is the PAC has been brought along you're much further ahead in the decision-making process than what we will be presenting to the public tonight. So we don't want you to think of, what is this inconsistency if you show up tonight and, because we really need to educate the public on what the Pell process is and where we are on this big study. You guys are much further along, and so I just want you to realize that when you come tonight, you're not gonna go, what the crap, this is a completely different presentation, so. So as you've seen before, we're now, as Krisha was saying, we're now looking at the concept combinations. We want to go through today a little bit about how we are, what the process is for screening these combinations. So just a reminder, we've got quite a complex corridor here. We've got separate issues that exist on the east, the west, the center. You know, the center, we've got the interchanges and the connection to local sources. The west end and the east end, we've got the connection with 7. So we broke it up into segments. This is just kind of a reminder. So we've got a mainline segment that can solve some of the congestion issues with some of the concepts presented, and we've screened. We've got the west segment, the center, and the east segment, again, each with their own concepts that have been screened on which concepts are moving forward. We ended up, if you recall, with 1 in the main line, 2 separate ones in the west, 3, 13, and 26 in the center, and in the east, 2, which gave us, with 12 permutations, gave us 12 concept combinations. We have labeled A through L just so we can separate them from concepts 1 through 26. And I'm gonna hand this off to Sharat and Connor. We've got a little storyboard to describe.
Would it be easier if we shut a light off, I wonder?
Is there a front light? I got it, right?
No.
So we've got, is that easier to see?
This
Is that too dark?
Yes,
That
yes,
good?
better, much better.
So we'd like you to kind of see how we combine the east, the center, the west, and the main line into one combination. So we've picked one example here, and that's concept combination A, to go through in some detail to show you how they've been combined and what the process is.
Thanks,
Thank you, Charlotte.
So I'll go through one of them, how we combine. I think you've been through the process of seeing the main line segment, the west segment, the center segment, and the east segment. So we'll show you how we combine it. So this combination of concept combination A has 4 concepts that are combined. Concept 1, which is the mainline lane ad, which is the only one that was picked on the main line. The 6 on the west, which is the Seeger Street connection to from I-84. Concept 3, which is the hospital access at Tamarack. And concept 14, which is the one to the east, where we looked at a CD road in the eastbound direction only. So this is the combination. You can in the map see this is the mainline lane ad, which is the mainline concept. The west concept, which is more focused on Seeger Street, this is the ramp to Seeger Street, this is the connection. Scroll east, Connor a bit. And then this is the new Tamarack Avenue interchange where we are eliminating the existing North Street ramps and providing full access interchange to Tamarack. And then if you scroll to the east, this is the concept 14 where we have a CD road to prevent this left turn movement from 7th South to Newtown Road. Also have some revisions to the whole, we call it turtleback. I know Barry used to call it humpback. So it's kind of the one-way pair that we looked at. So certainly that is part of that 14. So those are the 4 pieces that are combined together. Now we're going to go a little bit more in detail. So as all these combinations go from the New York line all the way to the east past exit 8, that's kind of where the times happen. So it's about a 9-mile corridor. Now we're going to zoom into some of these areas. So going from the New York line to kind of where exit 3 is, where Route 7 kind of peels off, there's no changes on any of the interchanges except we added additional lane from the New York line to the exit 3 area. Scroll to the next one.
And again, Shrub, that's part of the main line.
And that was part of
that main line concept.
And that's part of the main line concept that we carry forward is a lane ad. And you'll see that whole lane ad happens from the west to the east as we scroll around. So here's where we pick into that west segment or the west concept that we talk about. This is the changes on the ramps. So the left-hand ramps here are switched over to the right hand. This is a 84 westbound movement to 7th South, which is today a left-hand ramp, switch to the right-hand side. Route 7 North to 84 West, which is today a left-hand entrance, switch to the right-hand side. This is the Seeger Street connection. This is where we shift 84, we have to shift 84 slightly to the left or the west in the eastbound direction just to get this ramp underneath it. So it's kind of more looking at the verticals and trying to figure out what the best, where we can get these ramps. And also Seeger Street is going to be probably the lowest ramp between the 7 ramps, because we're going to sneak in the Seeger Street ramp underneath those ramps in terms of elevation. So that's why the shift at 84 was needed. We also pulled 7 a little bit to the west. This is the existing 7, and we'll kind of see that in the next slide. There's a slider bar. But also what we're doing is we're preventing that 84 east movement to Lake Avenue. So anyone who exits today has to move over several lanes to get to Lake Avenue. That movement is now going to happen through Seeger Street. So 84 traffic would not be able to make that movement to Seeger, to the lake, which is a pretty tough movement today. If you scroll to the next one. So here's a slider bar. So I don't know if you mind sliding it. You can kind of see this is existing, and this is this proposed. So kind of see how this ramp kind of comes into this space. And then you kind of see that left-hand ramp is now the right-hand ramp here. This left-hand ramp, which comes here, is now the right-hand ramp there. And you can kind of certainly see there's more ramps now with the changes of those left-hands to right-hands. We are also trying to maintain a better curve. If you notice today, a lot of traffic slows down as they're coming towards Lake Avenue, either through stopping side distance or they don't have enough distance to look at that exit. By pushing this highway to the west a bit, we are opening up this area, but also improving this more curved section.
Well, all right, so if you do that, the on-ramp from 7 north to 84 west is the flyover. And right now, 84 east goes under that, right? Is there, like, can you do that? Like, is the space, the physical space of the highway too much for that overpass to bear the weight of it?
So what is going to happen, Barry, is that the highway is shifting over to make room for the Seeger Street ramp. So as we're doing that, we're also elevating. So the point at which this ramp comes in here is shifted as well to the west.
Oh.
So in order for us, because we are trying to straighten this as much as we can, to bring this ramp on and try to tie it back in, we're not going to be tying this ramp back into where this existing 7 on is tying it. So there's definitely, we're still going over, but we're taking longer distance to tie it back in.
It's coming from the right now.
It's not coming from the right. So that's the whole thing. I mean, that was the whole improvement we made, is to put it on the right.
Yeah.
Because that is, as you know, as 84 westbound traffic is coming and 7 north traffic is merging in, there's always that shifting of people trying to get into that leftmost lane, and it's hard because you're not able to look behind you because you're coming off a curve.
And then like you said also, Barry, that with that longer throat you'll be able to tie into the right elevation, because we got a much longer throat as we come in from the right and have that longer approach.
Do you have profiles or grading plans that show?
Well, these are conceptual. These are
We've
conceptual
done
right
some
now.
3D work using CAD drawings to understand this. We've not done full detail, that's not part of this effort, but
Just
understanding.
so we can understand,
Yes,
different
we did.
elevations.
We did.
That's available online?
It's not available online, but we can certainly discuss it. I think we gave it to you, Tom, and
Yeah, it looks like it's been changed a little bit since I've seen it.
I mean, this is not to scale, I mean, just to make sure this is
Yeah.
not an engineered plan, this is conceptually being shown, so in terms of the actual drawing.
Yeah, I just want to see that it really works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So do you know off the top of your head the angle of this versus the existing highway right now? Because that's a major issue. I mean, one of the biggest things that a lot of us hit on is the traffic more than anything that goes through the corridor. It's fast moving traffic, and that's still a pretty sharp curve. I mean, maybe we're adjusting it by 20 degrees, if that, or even less than that, but it's still gonna, I think, result in an issue in that area.
So what's happening, Chris, is that today, one of the things that you talk about traffic is a lot of the slowdown that happens in this area is the sight line that you have going into that Lake Avenue exit.
Well, I think, sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. I'm talking about more like existing traffic that goes through there. It's not more about the people that, or where they're going, it's the curvature of the road. By nature, people don't really pay attention, it's a very sharp curve, and when you have tractor trailers, 2x2, or even 1x2, like for example. And I forgot where he went, but we just had a major issue on 84 a few weeks ago, where a tractor trailer was essentially cut off by a driver who wasn't fully paying attention, and I think what happened was ended up going a little bit more to the right, and the truck swerved, flipped its entire load, and closed the highway for pretty much like 5 or 6 hours. That's still gonna be an issue with this curvature now. I mean, we're straightening out a little bit, but it's still, I would like to see more information about this curve and the angle about it, and I know you said that it would meet the 70-mile-an-hour adjustment, which we're gonna switch from, I think it's like 45 now. But I wanted to get a little bit more. I know we're not there yet.
Yeah, so we will look at it more in design, and we'll be looking at it. So one of the things I do want to point out is that if you look at this existing, you have almost like a bell shape, like up and down type thing. We are straightening this out more, so you don't have this swing. If you imagine yourself going, there's no tangent section today, so you're going straight across, and then you have to kind of swing a little bit to the right. We are straightening this out, so you're maintaining a certain speed through that curve.
Well, yes, but you're also swinging you're swinging left
Yeah.
further though, which
We,
is gonna be an issue.
I think, we obviously understand, we'd like to
Of course,
try to
but-
flatten as much as possible,
Yeah.
but again, we've got some constraints, and those details, I think,
Yeah.
get worked out as we get through the process.
That's a good point.
Even in the.
In your experience
thank
as well, how much of the slowdown that people have coming through that left-hand turn is more about the optical illusion of the space shrinking because of the overpass?
You're absolutely right. It's 100% because of that. I think this bridge is one of the reasons why people don't know what's coming ahead of them. So by straightening this, we're able to get better sight line through that overpass because we're able to see better because
Be able to see the other side.
you'll be able to see the other side. I mean, not the full extent of going all the way to Lake Avenue, but it opens up that vision of how you would see what you would see ahead of that bridge, which right now totally gets blocked because you just don't know when 7 is coming. And 7's one of the things to kind of curve 7 is 7's now almost got a straight shot here. So your 7 is much faster in speed than 84 is because when 7 merges with 84, 7 is merging at a higher speed than 84 is at this point, which is not the way you would want to do it because 84 is a bit higher function class or higher operating roadway than 7 is. So by doing this curve, we're also trying to introduce that slowing down effect and the merge becomes more easier than
Did
having
you say
two
there's
high
not gonna be a merge because you're gonna put up a wall and the 7 people are gonna exit at Lake Avenue, but the 84 people are gonna exit at Seeger Street and they'll never mix?
They will mix down, like even the 7 through traffic would have to mix if you scroll up.
Oh, the through traffic.
They would have to come here through this area and they would be able to go through here. So they would go past the Lake Avenue exit and merge back to 84.
Right, but it would be past Lake
Past
Avenue.
Lake Avenue, correct.
That makes a big difference.
But you're flattening the curve horizontally, but vertically, you're gonna flatten that too, I imagine, it
Yeah.
sounds like. And that's a big issue there. I think the 84 now goes down under the ramp and then back up, and that's,
Yeah, so it's
So
all,
it's
it's all
both
needs to be
ways.
engineered, but I think
Yeah.
it does work with the grades that we looked at.
Yeah.
Try to-
so that's gonna be a big improvement too, vertically,
Yeah.
the vertical
Yeah.
on it.
Any more questions on this exit? Okay, so we want to use. So here's where we have the center section improvements, which is the Tamarack Avenue full interchange. And this interchange here would be eliminated, so one of the options to the hospital, that's here. So one of the options to connect to the hospital from Tamarack. So this is the concept 3 option of the 3 options that we looked at in the center section.
Now, could I just ask, during our technical meetings with the city, the engineering department felt very strongly that we needed on and off ramps at exit 6. Is that option still in play here?
Correct, yes. That's 26. That's still, so as I said, 3 is, that's part of combination A.
Right.
3 is one of the options, and if you look down the list and look at, I don't remember the alphabets there, but I think E, F, G or something like that, we'll have 26 in there. So there are 3 in the center section that Rick talked about. One of them is the.
Yeah, I think the engineering department felt very strongly we needed to deal with exit 6, with on and off ramps in both directions. And then an access to Tamarack, a connector road to Tamarack.
So that's the center one. And then going to the east, we have 14. So So a few things that 14 does, eliminates the left-hand exit, 84 east to 7 north. It puts on the right-hand side, and this would be kind of a CD road that parallels 84 in the eastbound direction only. Traffic that wants to get to 7 would get off the CD road and then go 7 north. They can stay on the CD road and take the exit to Newtown Road. So once you leave the CD road, you have the option of going to Newtown Road, Route 7, or you can get back on 84 east if you do want, if you by mistake enter the exit. So suddenly that option, the 7 south ramp, which is today a left-hand ramp coming on to 84 east, is now the right-hand side on the CD road and the exit to Newtown Road. Yes, Chris?
Is the curvature, or not really curvature, but the elevation going to be fixed through that little corridor too from exit 7 to 8? Because that's another one of those corridors where you go up and to the right, and we don't have many accidents there, but if they rise, they're there, and generally the same thing happens. People either fall asleep, truckers, they'll go straight instead of making the right. I mean, it's the same issue that I think we had by exit 3, where you go down and then you go up. And then if there's a curve involved, then people can't handle that. So is there anything that's going to be done with that, or is it just going to be left over?
So there's horizontally, we're improving this curve through here. Vertically, there might be some changes in elevation, I think, to try to get these ramps through there. I'm not specifically sure about exactly what elevations are changing. There's more work on the exit 3 area, more related to, because there are ramps that are being moved around. Here, I'm not too sure. I know this 7 south ramp has to go over the highway because it's right now raised over everything. And we are bringing it further down to merge with the CD road versus where it meets now. So that I know is the kind of the highest elevation of the ramp. Horizontally or on 84, I'm not sure the vertical grades are changing that much. We haven't really looked into that detail.
Okay. Well, yeah, we'll do a pipe further down.
Yeah,
Or
we'll
just
probably,
general. Thank you.
Expenses.
So with this CD road, that means that you won't have a freeway-to-freeway connection going 84 east to 7 north and 7 south to 84 east?
Correct.
Will it be, will there be intersections and signals in between, or will it be non-freeway, but it will still be
Non-freeway, but like a frontage road.
limited access?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's a very short section of the, if you just want to scroll kind of a bit to the east. Not zoom out a bit. Zoom out a bit more, one more ahead.
I guess the question is it more like an exit 8 in Stanford, or is it like when you're in Yonkers and you're getting on 87? That total mess.
No, I gotta think about that. 87 in Yonkers or
Like south, right? Basically, there's the nightmare CD road, right? Like,
Yeah, it's kind of like Waterbury is. I mean, you have like a frontage.
so there might be a light, right? So will there be an
So
intersection?
there's no light in here, so
Yeah.
So if I want to trace the movement, so if you're going 84 east, you get off the CD road, you stay on the CD road, no signals.
No signals.
No signals, you're just moving. And then there'll be a ramp sign saying Newtown Road. So it'll be an exit from Newtown Road, so no signals unless you get to the Newtown Road existing intersection.
Oh, okay. Oh, so it's like the I-84, 384 interchange.
Correct, kind of
It's
like,
like
but it's not as
Waterbury,
high
too.
speed as
Okay.
something like that, but it's being.
So there won't be an intersection at Federal Road?
No, we can't, I mean, Federal Road is great, I mean, we have the railroad track, we can't have the
Right.
Federal Road, great.
It's gonna fly over it. Yeah.
It'll be just
Okay.
a structure that kind of goes over both Federal and the rail. And there's a structure over.
Yeah,
the
that's what I was
rail.
trying to get at, was make sure there were no lights, so you have
No,
free-flowing traffic. Although it would be nice to have access to the east part of Danbury there if you could, you know.
yeah, the problem is, this is so high up.
Yeah.
That we can't get Federal Road. I mean, the only way to get to Federal, you probably know, is through the Star Ave through here. But it's very hard to get access to Federal from there. That's one of the reasons where we are hoping that that CD road would, I mean, that's why we see a lot of that 7 south traffic trying to get to Newtown Road and using 84 is because Federal Road is not directly connected to the east side of
Yeah, I
Denver.
mean, that's an area I always use GPS in because it
Yeah.
changes every single time. It's so crazy.
Yeah, it is. It is. So hopefully this will help that the move from 7 south to Newtown better, because now you're bringing everyone on the right side. Yes, Chris?
So what are your thoughts on that Federal Road on-ramp to Route 7 southbound? Because I know, or 84 westbound, like that ramp too, or further, like if you're on to the north? Because we've talked about potentially getting rid of that because that's kind of an issue that has been long-standing where it kind of slows down existing traffic on Route 7 already. So is that still in play? Like, is that gonna be?
So as part of the overall project, program that you have this plan, this lane today drops somewhere here before you merge with 84 West. The intent is to carry forward that lane into 84.
So it'd be
So you get
three?
2 lanes,
Oh,
so you have 3 lanes on 84 and 2 lanes coming from 7. And then we will merge them together for 5 lanes. At some point, we'll drop the 5th lane and there will be only 4 lanes going west.
So,
And then pick up a 5th lane somewhere near exit 5.
so will 7 then drop a lane from 2 to 1?
It won't be a drop, it would be a kind of a, almost like a, it won't even be merged, like lane add almost, with 2 7 lanes. So it'd be 3 plus 2, 5. So basically, in order for us to maintain, again, going back to that lane add option, maintain lane continuity in terms of trying to maintain that 3 through lanes on 84 all the way through, we can't drop any lanes from 7 because 7's coming
Yeah,
in 2 lanes. So we have to carry those 5 lanes up. And at somewhere between, we haven't really figured out, we'll be dropping the 5th lane. So then the 4th lane, 4 lanes become kind of what the lane add options have.
But so my concern is, though, is that second lane you're gonna be adding is gonna be essentially that federal road on-ramp? Or is that gonna be?
It would be, and they're pretty
Yeah.
volume-wise, they're pretty equal.
But
The
that's, okay, but you're still though relying on that second lane to be an on-ramp. So essentially you're still dropping a lane. Route 7 goes from 2 lanes to 1 lane. That should be 3 lanes though technically if you have an on-ramp.
No, this piece of Route 7 now is only 1 lane.
Yeah, but prior to that, it's 2 lanes. There's a split off there. One goes.
Yes, yeah, so this will be split out, this will be 1 lane, this 1 lane will add, there'll be 2.
But one is the on-ramp, right? That,
Correct.
yeah, but that's my concern. I just wanna bring that up.
Yeah.
When you're still.
And we
gonna
haven't
rely-
really looked at it, it's possible we may make this 2 lanes all the way
Okay,
here
yeah,
and
because
just have
that's
the
a big
merge coming.
issue. You see that every time on the weekend where people will slow down traffic and not because they're trying to merge, more so it's just as weaving and bobbing. People even from Route 7 will try to go on the shoulder southbound, just pass everyone that's even trying to go there.
And
which
that's
is-
because there's a lane drop here. People
Yeah, well,
try to
that's,
merge
you're
it.
right, yeah, I will, yeah.
Yeah, that's because there's a lane drop there. John?
I think you go uphill.
Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah,
natural
you're right,
slowdown.
definitely, yeah.
After all that merging, you're not going uphill,
Yep.
Right.
and everybody slows down.
And then it's easier, like today, even today now, I think there's a lot more merging happening further here. And part of the things that happen today are because people are also shifting over to the left side to get to the 7th exit at exit 3. Because that's a left-hand exit. So there's a lot of cross movement, which will be avoided once the ramps are switched to the right side on exit 3.
It's gonna feel a lot more intuitive. I mean, it's a brain exercise to get through there today. You
Yeah,
can't be on
it
your
is.
game.
I think that's about it, unless anyone has any questions. So we basically bring that lane add right out here. You're gonna exit 8, past exit 8, and merge back to existing. This is kind of where the volumes go down. Because once the 7 traffic leaves, the 84 traffic generally becomes more natural transition, so.
Thanks, Rob. Boy, I'm glad I've got him. So, as you know, in the middle of this Pell study, thanks, Connor, in the middle of this Pell study, these are concepts. And that's why we can't answer a lot of your specific questions, Tom, also, because there's no design done. These are conceptuals, but they've done them with the expertise of Sharat and his group, so they know that it will work functionally. We're not just putting something out there that won't work functionally. So as you remember, we just showed you the 1, 6, 3, and 14. And Tom, to your answer, there's that 26 that has those on and off ramps at 10. All right, so, so like 1, 6, 26, 14, and 15 are these here, E and F. So those concept combinations do include the 26. So these are all still being thought of as concepts, and we just showed you how one was laid out, 1, 6, 3, and 14. But we've looked at all of them and the impacts and the process to screening for all those. Does that make sense a little bit? So if you recall this beautiful, the weathermen call this a tornado, I call it a funnel. We are putting all 12 of the concept combinations, A through L, and to see if they're feasible. The first thing, can they be built? Can they function together? So can we bring 14 in with 3 when we're adding a lane on main line? Those kinds of concepts. Does that work? And that's our first. And then, does it meet our Pell purpose? Is it reducing the congestion? Is it increasing mobility, or is it just shoving it off to another problem someplace else? Well, it's across the New York line, I guess. And then we'll be going into that redundancy analysis to see if any of these concept combinations have the same purpose, serve the same purpose, but one is better than the other. Either it serves it a little better or has less impacts. And then the matrix analysis, where you remember seeing all the red, green, and yellow dots, looking at all the different issues to see. So, if you recall, we've got engineering considerations and we've got environmental considerations. And in each of these buckets, we have key considerations and additional considerations. The key considerations really play into a decision. You know, reduction of weaving. But for instance, if we wanted access to Bob's Burgers, was one of the hopes that we get out of this. It's not a key consideration, but boy, it sure would be nice if we could have access to Bob's Burgers, right? Same with environmental, we've got key considerations, things that could make a decision, and we've got additional considerations. So in our engineering considerations, we want to address congestion and mobility. And if you recall, when we had broken these up into our segments, main line, west, center, and east segment, we were looking at travel times. FHWA has these reliability indices that we are looking at for both directions of 7, both directions of 84, both morning and evening time periods. So we're looking at these reliability. We'll explain that in just a minute. But we also have the corrections of weaving. So these are all key engineering considerations. The other thing we've done when we're looking at these concept combination screens, if you recall, for each segment, we had an entire table of considerations that were not differentiators. There was no difference in a segment, a west segment, an east segment, a center segment. For all of the considerations we were looking at, they all impacted that resource to the same degree, or they all met the reduction of congestion to the same degree. We don't use those as differentiators to see all of the concepts, right? So we've removed those from the concept combination screening, all of those issues that were non-differentiators. So we go back, so here's, and here Sherrod is going to be sitting there with his hands in his pockets, chomping at the bit to correct me, because I know I'm going to be wrong here. So if we look at average travel time, that's what you and I experience on the road. Let's just say this point right here in the morning, it takes me 1 hour to get from my home to my destination. This is on average, over the course of my year, I can get to work in about an hour. But, like Chris pointed out, we've got 18-wheelers that flip, we have accidents, we've got snowy weather, we've got bad weather. The planning time index takes into consideration all of those things. Maybe, if I were to take into consideration all of our Sunday snowstorms, all of our 18-wheelers that flip, maybe it takes me 2 hours to get to work. Well, my boss doesn't care if I come in at 8 or 9, but oh my gosh, I've got an 8 o'clock meeting. I have to be in at 8. I now have to plan 2 hours instead of 1 hour to make sure that anything that could change my drive time, you know, if it happens, I still arrive at my 8 o'clock meeting that I have to be to. So that's the difference between the planning time index and the average travel time index. And this other one is just that buffer time. So you can see there's obviously a relationship between planning and buffer and average travel time. But the buffer time index is just how much time extra at any time during the day would I need to be able to get all those other considerations. Sorry, I flipped that backwards. So we have additional considerations. Our maintenance, our maintains direct access to north. FHWA has a prescribed distance that they would like our ramps no closer than, right? But there are design exceptions. So it's not a key consideration, because it's not like, okay, that can't get built if they are closer than X. We still have design exceptions that could be, so it's under additional considerations. It's those types of things that are additional. Now, then we've got our environmental considerations. So we've got our natural environment key considerations, like wetland impacts, things that may or may not be able to be permitted. Or if I've got 300 acres of impacts versus 1 acre of impact, the Corps of Engineers is going to have something to say about that 300 acres, and as well as the stream impacts. Then we also have some of these additional considerations in the environmental, you know, our floodplains and floodways and flood zones. So that really leaves us then down to the built environment. The environmental considerations are built and natural environment. And our built environment, we have key considerations are how many property takes, whether they're residential, commercial, whatever. We also have a very sensitive EJ population through the area and potential 4F impacts. So these are our key considerations in the built environment. Some of the additional ones are partial takes and this kind of stuff, but because this is not an engineered concept combination yet, we all know that if we've got a run out slope that takes 2 inches of a property, that's considered a partial take. But once we get into final or full design, when we get into the detailed environmental analysis like into NEPA, we can maybe put a retaining slope and miss that partial take. So there's a lot of differentiation once you come to partial takes versus full takes. There's a lot of things that could be mitigated. So we're not looking at those in detail at this big conceptual. So we wanted to pause for a second to see if you guys have got any questions to date, and then we're going to let Sharat talk about some of the non-highway options that we've looked at. Clear as mud, Sharat.
So just to add a little color to that, so we are looking, Rick had a couple of examples of the key considerations and the other considerations. So our next task is to complete this analysis and come back to you with, similar to our last in-person meeting, with our docs and our matrices and show you how these actually matched up against one another as we're looking at full solutions by adding the concept. So that's the next step for us to come to you.
Thanks. I think that's great, because that's a really good point, because at that point, we hope that these 12 concept combinations, A through L, can be whittled down. We may be carrying all 12 of them into the NEPA analysis. We may carry 3 of them in. We don't know what the analysis will look like. But that's what we'll bring to you next, is our red, yellow, and green dots, and kind of show how they all shake out for our travel time indices, for our engineering considerations, the corrections of weavings, for our built and natural environment impacts. So we'll have those red, yellow, green dots at that point and show you what our recommendations, what the Pell Studies recommendations would be on how many of those 12 combinations get carried into the more detailed analysis, where we'll start off with a 30% design, and we'll actually have, you know, a greater understanding of what the footprint could be, or what mitigation could be done to reduce footprints. Chris?
What's the timing on that? What time, when do you think that will be done by?
The Pell study?
No, like this next process, essentially.
Oh, the next process. We're hoping to have another PAC meeting in
You said like, yeah, that's
January,
on the sides
February.
there, but yeah, January, probably more like February, you know.
So then that's when this will be done, I would assume, then the next.
Well, I think that'll be that we'll have those results.
Yeah, we'll have those
And-
results at that point.
You know, as they mentioned, and I was gonna mention this later, but, you know, we also have to, you know, internally, we're looking at some of these considerations, we're having those discussions, and that's gonna continue within our team and as we get these results. But yeah, that's the plan, probably late January, I would say February.
Okay, thank you.
Pointer here, Sharat.
Thank you. Any other questions on that? I'm gonna switch gears. Last chance. All right, so I think there's been some discussions about what are we doing now? You know, what's something that we can kind of look at. So this is one of the concepts. I think one of the PAC meetings in the past, you guys have seen this what's called a TISMO option. So this is a federal highway program where things could be built sooner, and the idea is to maximize the use of the existing cross section. to see, we don't have to, once we get into widening the roadway, we get into impacts, as Rick pointed out, several of those impacts, the engineering impacts, environmental impacts. But this is something we are investigating, and we're getting into a little bit more feasibility analysis, is to see if we can provide an additional lane in the peak direction only. So we would widen the road, or may not be required to widen the road, we are kind of still investigating it, and provide this fourth lane, too fast. Fourth lane in the middle. So what we would be doing is first looking at the existing roadway bit and seeing if there's a way we can introduce this fourth lane by reducing the shoulders. So there's an existing 10-foot shoulder on the left side today and a 12-foot shoulder on the right side. To try to see if we can somehow get maybe a small shoulder and use that shoulder area to put that fourth lane, which if you guys have traveled the Tappan Zee in the past, you've seen this kind of a lane use sign that allows you to switch the lanes, and they have like a barrier machine that goes, there's not going to be a barrier machine here for sure, I promise. But in the Midwest, they're doing this quite a bit. They're introducing a fourth lane. In the peak periods, if you're going towards New York in the morning, this fourth lane would be open. If you're going towards Hartford, this lane would be closed in the morning. In the evening, this lane would open up because traffic in the evening is coming towards Hartford. In the evening, this lane would be closed. In the middle of the day, you would close both those lanes. Those lanes would not be used. The purpose is to provide the capacity or the additional space the cars need to have to use that fourth lane. And to be able to do that much quicker, the thing that we're working on right now and working closely with the department is to see how best we can maximize the use of the existing pavement that's out there. Do we need to do some spot widening? Could we accommodate it maybe by reducing lane widths? Those are details we're working on. Certainly there's a lot more impact that could happen to potential overpasses and structures because of any kind of improvements we need to make along the way. But we are investigating. This is a potential option that certainly could provide short-term some relief on that congestion that goes in the morning and the evening.
Sure, would that include, like down on 95 heading south, they have gates that open and close, the red and green, it's just not a sign above an arrow. It's like a gate that opens or.
Virginia, or
Yes,
Pennsylvania,
exactly.
Virginia, yeah. So there's different types of.
Yeah, I think we've had some internal discussions, yeah, I think the gate they can definitely provide a problem for maintenance and all that, but that's something that we'll evaluate.
Yeah, we'll evaluate.
If this moves forward.
There you go.
Oh, so this would involve sacrificing the left shoulder?
Yeah, it won't be a full shoulder. It will not be sacrificing. It will be, again, that's being looked at.
Right.
I mean, it would be a smaller shoulder possibly, but not be a full. One of the things that is a consideration is the drainage.
Yeah.
Because
Right.
as you have, there's a lot of, there's actually drainage along the center median. So as you have a storm and stuff, there could be potential ponding. So reducing the shoulder would not have it available. That's why this lane is not used 24/7. Is essentially to have maintenance be able to keep that lane. If you don't have a full 10-foot shoulder and you have a smaller shoulder, it doesn't have any opportunity to clean that and be able to maintain it as a lane during those peak periods.
So I know we looked at this on 95, although it was the right shoulder, not the left shoulder, several years ago, maybe 15 years ago, at peak hour, and that was decided not to be pursued because of emergency vehicle access. And I know you still be maintaining the right shoulder here, but you still will create issues with emergency vehicle access on the left, and also, finding out like the zone for the cars to pull, disabled cars to pull off on. And we discussed widening 84 from exits 8 to 11, and this is the exact same issue we ran into, was that you can't maintain the full shoulder at the times you're most likely to have collisions and breakdowns.
Right. And you're right.
The left side definitely has more benefits than the right side.
Correct.
I do remember
Yeah.
looking at that right side years ago, especially with the exits. The gore area becomes short, your merges become very short, so it's more of an unsafe situation. The left side,
Right.
you don't have that as much because there are no ramps. But yeah, that's something that we have to look at. That's what we have to evaluate, how much of a shoulder would be remaining if we don't widen on the right side.
Well, one other thing with that, and then a second question, you have drainage issue in the middle, and therefore that lane is banked a little bit. So how is that going to affect the speed and handling of cars when the road is not level in that spot because of drainage, so water can drain. And then number two, where and how do you start and stop that extra lane? If you're not gonna use the bridge zipper like the old Tappan Zee Bridge did, where and how does that get executed?
Two very good questions. The first question, the banking of the road, that have to be looked at. The road probably would have to be reconstructed, and the crown, so-called the crown would have to be adjusted so that, the water is drained properly. And obviously to the point about the median drainage, I mean, we'll have to look at that and see. That's the reason why this lane may have to be maintained during those off-peak periods to be cleaned up. And in the Midwest, they do this as a permanent condition. In Michigan and Wisconsin, they have this running as, and they don't even have a bearing machine, they have like a yellow paint line, and people hopefully follow it. There's enforcement going on. And then there's an incident on the left side, they shut down the lane. There are cameras that immediately trigger someone to shut down that lane, and there's signage that goes back. So they've been doing this, so they kind of know how this works.
Right, I think you introduce the technology aspect of
Yeah.
it, the cameras and the signage, that makes it a lot easier in terms of, you've got operations that can see if there's a breakdown in that lane, and they can shut down that lane. So that definitely helps with the technology.
Right. And to your second point, Barry, about the way it starts and ends, it has to start where 7 bit comes in. So we're still figuring out exactly how the transition happens, because the capacity is needed when the 7 traffic merges onto 84. So we're not going to be starting this back in Bethel or Newtown or anything like that. It'll be more closer to exit 7 as you're going westbound, and we'll be doing that more towards exit 3 as you're going eastbound, somewhere near Lake Avenue. Where we'd start exactly, we would have to figure that out. There's also a lot of issues with striping and markings, where people have to move over lanes, so that, because we're not changing the ramps to right-hand side as part of this effort. Our ramps are still going to be on the left-hand side. So we want 7 traffic to be on the left, because any kind of movement they do during that will be much more confusing. Yes, Francis.
So if you're gonna look at Dismo and, trying to manage this, I would say then, why not just open up the whole can of worms and say, okay, let's consider ramp metering on Route 7 to control the flow of cars, the ramps on the Route 7 control, so you reduce the cars coming on to 84, right? You have a lot more space up there with the newer design of that freeway than you have down in central Danbury. Or let's look at peripheral routes through Danbury, because we know that's not easy to do right now. We have a lot of 3-way stops and 4-way stops. The signals aren't coordinated ideally, and maybe that can help divert some traffic. And that might be more cost effective than trying to do an interim reconstruction in 84 to accommodate this.
Good point. So we are looking at some of those that you just mentioned. We did look at ramp metering at 7, and we were not able to get the throughput on 7. We were creating problems on 7 merging with 84, because the volumes are almost 2,000 cars in an hour, merging into 3,000 cars an hour. So we're backing them all the way back to Brookfield and Milford. So putting any kind of controlling the throughput on the 7 would not be much different than what you see today with the lane route.
That's intermittent to let people off the
Yeah.
road?
Yeah.
Oh,
They're fantastic.
I knew California.
Yeah, they have, it's very effective.
It works, the volumes have to work accordingly. The problem is, these are almost 2 freeways coming together.
Oh, no, I don't mean on the 7 main line, I mean control access onto 7 from surface streets, farther
We
up
tried
7.
even Federal Road on-ramp.
Yeah.
It just backs up Federal Road.
Too much volume.
Too much volume. There are cars trying to get on. We even tried ramp metering on Main Street, coming on from exit 5 on. Main Street just get bogged down all the way down to Downs and even past Downs. Ramp metering by itself was not working. And the other point about the right side shoulder use doesn't work well here because the exits are too close. Exit 5 and 6 are very close to each other. So any kind of shoulder use would require people moving over, crisscrossing each other and trying to get on and off that shoulder to be able to get through. So we kind of looked at some of that. And there's some of the ones that you mentioned we'll still be looking at retiming signals, looking at some intersection improvements. We talked to Tom and Vera about that. And so there's some local things we could do, but certainly in terms of moving the highway traffic, the real piece is a 3 to 7 piece. And how can we get that moving within the short term?
So what's the next steps for this and timing on that? Like, is this something to be done 6 months, or like what's the next step in terms of decision making?
It's still being evaluated right now, right? So we had one meeting internally with management, and they sent us back and trying to get it done within the existing footprint in a sense, no widening, so we're taking a look at that and see what that evaluation is. But yeah, this is one of the ones that we were thinking that could be one of those early actions, right? So we can try to get it into that environmental phase and a design phase so we can get it to construction early.
So I would say like within the next
This
year.
would be from exit 3 to exit 8?
Seven. That would be just between the 7 to 7 yards.
Okay.
I was just saying, so next year, like within this next coming year, or we at least find out like somewhat of an answer behind it? Or?
Yeah, I think we'd be able to answer the question, are we moving forward with it? Yeah.
Perfect.
In the next 6 months, definitely.
Cool.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind there are about 30 structures that we have to look at too on the way, so it's just not the road, so that's kind of what we're. Any more questions on this before I move on to the next one? Okay, so besides just looking at this, we're now getting to the non-highway options. We did present several PAC meetings ago, other considerations, not from moving highway traffic, but looking at other potential ways of moving traffic more locally. So we had come up with some ideas, and we have had some discussions with Sharon and Hart and others. And these are pieces of that presentation we made. So this is the potential regional transit service that we could be provided between New Milford and Norwalk. I know the 7 South connection to Norwalk with the rail line is not as great, so there's a transit service that goes down to 7 along the 7 corridor. Looking at maybe improving that connection to New Milford, because there's a lot of New Milford traffic that is going towards York and also going down south to Norwalk. So looking at more of a regional service, we had come up with some initial numbers of how long this bus ride would take. I think it's about an hour, I think, roughly. We also looked at potentially connecting points on Southbury. This all came from the transit analysis, which indicated to us that a lot of the people who are traveling this 84 corridor are kind of focused in this orange-colored boundary area. So trying to move those people locally and also connecting those transit-dependent population to the bus stops and everything would be essential. So creating a local connection, and then also looking at some kind of a circulator service in the city that would provide connection to other HART services. So currently the HART has a pulse point, has had a pulse point. I understand that moved over to the train station, but it used to have a, but it is going to be moved over. One of the issues was your transfer. So all the bus routes come to a point in downtown, and then you have to walk over to an end of pulse point to connect the services either to the mall or others. So the idea was to provide this circulator service, which would have ways of opportunities for folks to either stop at the circulator service and go around the town. Don't have to, especially that east-west connection was lost. There was a lot of connection that was coming in north-south to this pulse point, and then you have to take a service to either go to New York to get the Harlem line or go to any of the mall, like for example, the mall or any kind of western points. Even WestCon, for example, WestCon on the West Campus. So this whole idea of the circulator service was to provide that transition and not have to do the transfer and connect those two service lines. So certainly this is something, these two services would have to be connected, this work with HART and the department to see how this could be advanced. We found there's some mobility options here. Certainly this is not going to potentially help the 84 traffic, but certainly would provide that connection that could be obtained by making these points work with each other.
And Shrub, if I can just interrupt for just a second, just to that point. If you remember, the Pell study is to link the planning and the environmental study. So the idea is it may not reduce the traffic on 84, but the idea is to coordinate and link all of the planning that's being done that aren't highway solutions with a potential highway solution, so that not only can these plans continue on, but so some choice that is made in the future for a build-out highway project doesn't negatively impact a plan to have a circulator route or to have these other ones. So these may not be directly part of a highway build project that comes out and goes to NEPA, but we hope that we have enough of the planning that it links into so we don't preclude good planning that's already gone on in the past.
Good point. David?
Would this service be offered, if it ever came to be, would it be offered only in one direction, or would both directions be offered simultaneously?
We could, I mean, this is circulator routes, so certainly the circulator routes are bi-directional. So
Okay.
it's a loop service. So you start and then there's a service kind of goes the opposite way and they kind of meet at some point.
Okay.
So certainly that, again, those details have not been ironed out, but it's an idea to kind of one of the things, as you all know, is 84 is used quite a lot for local travel. People want to go from point to the east or the west. If you live on the Newtown Road area, want to get to the mall, use 84. You don't use White Street or you don't use Route 6 or anything like that. You basically get on 84. The idea here is to provide that opportunity for someone to get on the circular service and not have to use the highway, which potentially could reduce some traffic on the highway that people use for these short local trips.
Well, I thought when we first started the project, that one of the things that we didn't want to do was ease congestion on the highway and impact congestion in the city. In other words, move it from the highway into the city, where now the city's congested.
Right.
During peak times. Because now with traffic in downtown Danbury, which is horrible, where it used to take you 10 minutes to get from one side of Danbury to the other, now it takes you 20 minutes to a half hour, so.
So one of the things, John, on that is that today traffic is using some of those local streets because 84 backs up quite a bit during peak period. So that's obviously with the highway improvements that we looked at to see how we can relieve that congestion on the highway, potentially some of the traffic. And we saw this early on that some of the traffic will go back to the highway that should be on the highway. And not like if you're going from the mall to Newtown Road, we hope you don't use the highways. Use a local street or use a bus or something else. But I think the intent is to push that traffic that's intended for regional travel on the highway, and the local travel should be on local streets. And that's the idea.
Two things. Number one, I think people in the city who have one vehicle instead of two might be willing to do this, depending on the price point.
Yeah.
I think people who have two vehicles, and a lot of families have two, they're suburban thinkers. I count myself in that. I'm not just getting on a train, on a bus just to relieve the traffic for the benefit of everybody. I'm getting in my car and getting where I need to go. So I don't know how much you're going to get people on these things.
But and then when we did our initial data collection, I thought there were a
There are two or more car hustles. The issue there to that is the connection from where you live to where you want to go is not there as seamless. So what we call is access to places. So if you want to take a bus today and you want to get to the mall, for example, you feel, oh my God, why do I need to take the car and go? I'm going to take the bus and go. I can just use my car. The idea is, again, once the service gets developed, is how best you can make that connection. What's the frequency? What's the connectivity? If we create an environment where you're able to do that much seamlessly than what we're able to do now, I think certainly there's again, this is a mobility option. Keep in mind, this is not an option where we want you to do that. This is an option you want to take a day where it's snowing or something like that, and you want to take the bus. So again, it just won't draw, as I said, it's not going to draw a lot of people on it.
Right.
But we want to make sure we plan accordingly that it will draw enough people that will make the choice to do that.
The other thing is, I like for people who want to connect to Norwalk and go to the city, I think it's almost more a marketing issue than a structural issue, because I took Metro North from Danbury to the city in August. I had to go to the city and I said, I have some time, I'm not rushed. Let's see what happens if I take the train from Danbury instead of going to Brewster. Well, going down, I never got off the train. I didn't have to transfer in South Norwalk. It went straight through. Coming home, I did have to transfer, but the train was on that platform on the other side, right there. It was get off the train, 5 steps, other trains right there, off you go. Now, I understand that Norwalk to Danbury is one rail, and if something happens, it's catastrophic. I get that. But it was pretty easy, and I just don't think people know enough about that. That it's not so bad going from here.
Sometimes it just takes one person to do it. The other thing is, it's interesting you say that because a lot of people want to go to the Harlem line.
Right.
Because that's a common choice if you live in Danbury.
Right.
You want to go to Putnam County and grab the Harlem line and go to Grand Central.
That's why I think it's a marketing issue. This is not bad.
It's one of those things that's education, and I think it's just people have to themselves make a choice that this is something that I want to do versus driving. So I think a lot of it is trying to provide the better connection to that place you want to go, and I think that's so. One of the things that also has happened is getting to Danbury Station and trying to get to how you access the Danbury Station, providing a better connection to Danbury Station. So all of this is something that has to be worked out, but these are options. These are certainly options that you could Yes, sir.
Does the state have like mass transit days? Like, I think I've heard that in other states, but I may be wrong, like days where the state markets like using mass transit instead of taking.
They're
your
doing
car.
a much better job of
Yeah, like,
publicizing and getting the service, especially with increased service, some of the, trying to get access for station amenities. You know, that's another thing that we're looking at in some of our other studies, really trying to make sure that you have those amenities there, you know, a bus shelter in certain places, right? So, do they have a specific day? I don't believe so, but
'cause I know like sometimes.
they are doing a much better job of getting the word out and marketing. But yeah, I agree, you know, if more folks could, utilize the service and spread the word, I think it would be.
I think Connecticut Transit has something about the student pass or something
Yeah.
so that they give you
Yes.
discounts or, which certainly helps this area. I mean, certainly you have Westcon here, right here, so, you know. Any other questions? So on the this one is certainly the rail analysis, rail study that is going on. Sharon, you're very familiar with that. This is the work that's going on in the city of Danbury and Putnam County. An ongoing, I think there was a feasibility study completed last year on looking at the rail bed between Danbury and Putnam County. So again, we're just piggybacking on that and that effort. You recognize that effort is undergoing, potentially helping relieving some of that traffic on 84, but who is using that connection to Harlem Line? Because there's a lot of folks who are going over to the Harlem Line, driving, parking there, and certainly this rail study would certainly help that, rail connection help that. We also looked at, and then Sharon and her staff are looking at these bicycle opportunities. We're looking at some areas where we might be able to, sorry, this map is too dense here, but we started to take a look at the whole corridor and identify some areas that could be improved to allow for some biking, whether they created separate paths or whether they are on-road paths that are protected. So we have some ideas here, some opportunities that could be investigated. We don't expect all of these would be in place, but certainly there could be a start in some areas where some of these shorter projects. So what happens always is you start small, it grows, and it becomes like a big project. So certainly Sharon and our staff are looking at some of these ideas, and certainly you need to understand that Danbury has a topographical constraint in terms of the elevations of the hills and everything, so biking is certainly a challenge. Probably because a lot of people don't use it because you have to be a really good rider to use it, especially with heavy volumes and stuff like that.
Have
So,
an e-bike.
yeah, a motorized bike, especially like Main Street and North Street, which are much more heavier in volumes in traffic and things like that. So, so having to look at some of these side roads, maybe to expand upon those, maybe looking at some other trail options. I know Sharon, you're looking at something on the trail side of things. So, so certainly those are opportunities again. We've kind of listed some of those, and something that we'll be putting, as Rick said, as part of the Pell report, as documenting as options or considerations that need to be moved forward.
Also to that point, Shrek, the Pell study is to look at reduction of congestion and increase in mobility.
Right.
And we're finding that through these kinds of studies and looking at these planning efforts, that maybe an increase in transit, an increase in bus, an increase in cycling, an increase in walking could add to that increase in mobility.
Yeah, and absolutely.
That's why it's a
I-84 is in
bigger
construction. You guys have to figure out how you get around. I-84 is in construction, so you have to look for a rail or a bus or. So some of the other ones, to Francis's point, we are looking at other. So we're looking at some. Departments already has a program to look at installing cameras and some signage. Like you probably have seen these large we call them variable message signs that are on the road that tell you, 20 miles, 10 minutes, or 20 miles, 15 minutes, or whatever the number is. These are VMS signs that are not in this part of the corridor now, but they have a program that is looking to put some VMS signs to inform you, like New York is X miles away, it's going to take you 5 minutes or 6 minutes. And also putting some cameras which allow people to look at the conditions of the roadway as you're traveling the corridor. We'll also be looking at some intersection type improvements. We have had a discussion with Tom and his crew about the Main and Brown intersection, so the city has a plan to look at that. We'll be investigating that further. We also talked about the humpback or the turtleback on the east side, which is that exit 8 area, to try to see how we can improve that area. That could be something. So what we call potential early actions, and I think we kind of wrestling with that term early action because some people think it's early action when it's going to be tomorrow, but that's kind of where or just and I can kind of lead you. So it's kind of a breakout. So we're kind of working with those terminologies. But some of those options would have to be studied more, coordinated more. These are not just something the department's going to take on its own. It needs to work with the city, needs to work with other agencies. But certainly those are options we will be looking at. And then there are some other what we call travel demand options, which require some employers to take part in it. So we had talked to Cardis way back when we started the project to see if they can introduce some ride-sharing program where people could be bused into the Cardis facility from the rail station. So they don't have to drive the car, so they're not driving into Cardis. If they take a rail, they can get to it. So as we have a travel demand management report that we issued where we suggested some of the opportunities that could be, all it does is for carpooling, van pooling. Some of the services that Connecticut Transit already has is the shuttle services that take you to the Harlem line. Similar to that, where you get into a park and ride, you would park your car, there'll be a bus that takes you all the way to your connection to your Harlem line. So those are options where, again, trying to improve that mobility between points. So those are things that are listed as part of this analysis. Would be something that requires a lot of, I would say that requires a lot more coordination and effort from various parties. So those are certainly things that are being looked at as part of some of the early action projects.
Cardis really helped you out. They sold the building and now everybody works from home.
So that's called flexible working.
India.
All right, so as you can see, thank you, Sharat and Rick. Team's doing a lot of good work continuing that on. And they've been very busy, keeping us busy at the department in terms of being able to, review some of their work that they're doing. And so the next steps as we move forward here, as Rick mentioned, finalizing that screening of the concept combinations, and I had mentioned that we're still looking at some of those engineering and environmental considerations, making sure that we've got the right ones and we're weighting them correctly. So we're having that discussion now, and that'll lead us into that range of reasonable alternatives. And those are going to move forward into that environmental study phase, right? So again, it's that 16, no, 12. How many do we have?
We got 12 now.
12. We got 12, and trying to whittle those down into that reasonable range that's going to move forward. So as we talked about, coming back to you probably January, more like February, I think. We've got a lot of work, we've got holidays in between, so we'll come back to you with those results in February. As Rick mentioned, we are continuing to document not only the methodology, but the results in the study and the Pell report. And that's going to go out for review, and we're meeting tonight with the public, and we're going to meet with them probably spring, summer to present the results of the study, similar to what you'll see in February. So with that,
I think you just got one more, the next slide.
we got one more?
Yeah, it's the fun slide.
Well, not this one.
Oh, that's too many.
So many presentations on the paper.
That's right, that's right.
So yeah, thank you again for coming, but we can answer any other questions. If anybody else has any questions.
Is the draft PAL available? Is it on the website?
It hasn't been, the draft hasn't been completed yet. We're still in the midst of it.
That's going to be in early 2023, at least for internally. We've got to have internal review at HWA. We'll review it also. So but we'll be able to see at least the bulk of the work in terms of the screening. We'll be able to see that in February.
Yeah.
We don't know the ending of the story yet, so we're writing as we go.
And again, I think it's important to remember we're trying to get to that next phase, that environmental study phase, and there'll be more work done, more engineering that will get done, more detail in that phase, so that we'll be able to answer some of those questions a little bit more.
I think it's that point, Neil, at that point, we'll be able to say things like, oh, you're looking at horizontal curves, and can this be moved? Oh, we can move it another 15 feet, we can straighten it out by 2 degrees here. It'll be this many more impacts, it'll be that kind of mitigation. So we'll be able to have those more detailed discussions once we're into that more detailed environmental phase where we actually have an engineering design.
I know that it does, the latest incarnations don't really seem like they're headed in this direction, but there really is a path that sounds kind of ominous where the government and or DOT, whatever, can actually take people's property?
Well, I mean, with any of these alternatives, there's gonna be, the possibility of, right-of-way acquisitions that would be part of, the alternative. Yes, those will get, vetted out as we go through the process, but we have our acquisition process that we have to follow. There's federal standards.
But,
that we
yeah,
have to
and
follow.
I think you ought to describe that a little bit, because it's offering fair market value.
Oh, yeah.
It's not taking
It's
somebody's
not-
property.
Right. So
It's
the process,
offering,
it goes through a normal process, appraisals.
appraisals of real estate folk and.
Right, so it goes through that, we have to follow those procedures to a T. And I think when you talk about eminent domain, that is that last resort that we have the ability to use if we need it.
So that's the other piece of this. I mean, we'll, as part of the concept combination, we'll be looking at number and type of potential property takes associated with this. When you get to the NEPA environmental phase, we really start looking at that, so one property could be a vacant lot of land, or one property could be an individual home, one property could be a 75 apartment complex, so, or it could be a business, or it could be a number of things. So we start looking at not only the number, but what's actually happening there and who would be impacted, both by the full takes and even the partial takes. I mean, let's go back to the 75 apartment building. If you take the entire parking area, you've rented, dysfunctional. So those are the kinds of things, every layer we get into this, we'll look at those kinds of things.
But also as an example, I worked on a project where we had our first public meeting and people were saying, like hell, you're gonna take my house, right? By the time we were done with the project, we literally had people wanting like photos with us and family inviting us into their home because they realized that they would much rather be relocated than being right up against a highway. So there's a lot of willing sellers and people who wanted to get out of the area. But as long as they understand the process as you walk through, and then the department has their real estate people who give fair market, it's a completely different idea than we're going to build this and we need your house, so see ya. It's that isn't the way. And like I said, this one was almost packing heat at the first, and at the end we were in their homes and part of their families. So if we don't have any more questions, we want to thank you for your time again. It was good to see you again. It's good to be out and alive. And there's sandwiches for your ride home, as long as you can eat them safely.
And feel free to come back tonight.
And bring your constituents tonight.
I don't think